Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, welcome to you. Good Lord, it's Thursday. Yee-haw! On Friday. Last day of August. By the way, what the hell happened to the super duper once in a lifetime almost super moon closest to Earth with Jupiter or Saturn or somebody off to its... Where was that? I was so excited about it. I delayed my dog walk so that it would coincide so that I could just see that moon everywhere. And didn't see it anywhere. Did the clouds move in? What the hell happened? I mean, to be teased like we were. We're not going to see a moon like that for another, what did they say? Not till 2037 or something. I'll be in my 90s or dead. Damn. So anyway, that was a big bust. Happy for those who got to see it. I'm glad I saw it the night before when it was, I guess, almost as wondrous. Anyway, that was a big disappointment. Hey, guys, where to start? Okay. I read something that was like almost hopeful. And I'm trying to be more hopeful since reading the mission statement of the Peace and Justice Center that my father founded at St. Norbert College. That protest is hope, shows hope. And if you're given to protest, you do have hope. The thing you got to watch out for is apathy and or despair, because that's giving up. So I read this thing, and written by a guy that I get a kick out of. And I thought that pretty much nailed it. And the guy who wrote it is, although I don't have it here, I swear to God, it was Peter Sagal. Peter Sagal? Yeah, that's it. And he does that show. Wait, don't tell me, on NPR, which I used to listen to religiously, and just for some reason they change when it's on, and I rarely bump into it anymore. Anyway, he talked about Trump and the cult. And the cult is, the more I read about how difficult it is to disabuse people who have signed on to a cult, and MAGA, Make America Great Again crowd, are in a cult. It's why we can't reach them. Why facts have no bearing whatsoever. Anyway, he wrote this. In part, as the nation faces a series of trials, both literal and metaphorical, what label we apply to Trump's movement really doesn't matter. The important question isn't whether or not Trumpism is a cult. It's whether the study of cults provides us with any path out. And he quotes a cult expert who was a former cult member herself. And she works with people, trying to get them back into reality. And she's been working with two of the January 6th participants at the request of their lawyers, seeing if she could not necessarily persuade them to recant as to help them when they appear in court. And she says, it is really hard to deprogram these people. It is so difficult, in fact, that she says it makes more sense to attack the demand side of cultism, calling for government programs that would treat disinformation and indoctrination as a kind of public health emergency. And this has to do with media literacy, too. Because if we educate ourselves, if enough people can be taught how indoctrination works, then they will be able to see it coming for them. They will see the effort, who's attempting it. And he asked the question, but what if it's already too late? Does educating people so they won't join a political cult in 2023 is like closing the barn door after the horse has gotten out? Somebody who wrote a book about cults says that Trump loyalists check every single one of the boxes of what is a cult of mind control. And he argues, this guy, that Trump does all of it. He restricts the information his followers are allowed to accept. He demands purity of beliefs, and those beliefs can change from moment to moment according to his whims, his needs. And also the appeals to his followers through primal emotions. And he points out something here that I forget, and I suspect some of you do too. We see how he appeals to his followers through raw emotion like fear and anger. But Peter Sagal wants us to remember that he also uses joy. And I'm thinking, what? Joy? And the reason I'm so incredulous is because apparently I've never been to a Trump rally. And he points out that at his rallies, people cheer and laugh, that they become almost these sort of ecstatic events. They love that their enemies are insulted or condemned, and they're having a ball. And so people who have been in cults and managed to get out, and by the way, not a lot do. Once in, it's rare that somebody manages to get out. And one of the reasons is that being in a cult, like a Trumper, is that you feel empowered. You feel special. You feel like you're one of the elect. You're close to the guy who has all the answers, who will make America great again, who will even go to jail for us. And so that's a real disincentive for anybody who's a Trumper to turn away. Nothing is more fun than knowing that you and your buddies are the ones who are right about everything and empowered. And the thing with Trump is he has managed to pull in other authoritarian cults, such as QAnon. That did not begin as it has merged with QAnon. And Sagel also points out two other groups, the Council for National Policy, which I've never heard of, which he says is a secretive networking organization of powerful conservatives, the Council for National Policy, and the New Apostolic Reformation, a theological movement that calls for Christians to rule. And he says, you know, the danger is metastasizing, obviously, thanks to digital and social media. He says people are on their phones 10 hours a day. People are up all night getting fed YouTube videos. You don't need to gather people together and have, meetings or indoctrination sessions. They can self-indoctrinate and do. As for reaching Trumpers through argument, give it up. The question is, what facts could anyone possibly conjure that haven't been put in front of his cult members and dismissed immediately? And here's the other biggie: to admit they're wrong. That, oh my God, I've been misled. No one likes to admit they've been conned. And so, I guess, you sort of give it up. Why did I say this was hopeful? Okay. Here. He talks a lot to a lot of people who were in cults. And one of the women was born into the Children of God, which is anything but. And she managed to get herself out. Most people who get out by themselves. There's some kind of survival instinct takes over, and they manage to get out. She went right from that into the U.S. Army. And she was blown away by the fact that seemed to be a cult, too. Certainly an authoritarian structure. And she said, and the more I realized it, you see that almost any organization or institution that has a pyramidal structure, somebody at the top and all the other people at the bottom, is somewhere on the cult spectrum, perhaps. And she then points out that the military clearly falls on the spectrum, and so does Alcoholics Anonymous, which I've talked about before. And she says both the military and AA are much further toward the dark end of that spectrum than you'd like to believe. This woman says the rules of cults are Well, the first rule of cults is you're never in a cult. Not in a cult. The second rule of cults is the cult will forgive any sin except the sin of leaving. The third rule of cults is even if he did it, that doesn't mean he's guilty. And all the cult experts this guy talked to says they don't believe that anybody can be argued out of Trumpism or any other firmly held belief. People can save only themselves. And she says that is happening. Often people will, for instance, save themselves, but be quiet about it. She suspects there are a lot more people who were Trumpers who aren't anymore, but are keeping quiet about it. She said she hears from a lot of young people, and they're so put off by Trumpers and the authoritarians. And she says, I hear from young people who say they're not ever going to vote for the people who made them do live shooter drills in school at the same time loosening gun laws. There is an obvious trend among young people in this country. They're walking away from conservatism. They're walking away from conservative Christianity. And so essentially what this ends up saying is they're going to have to die. All these old, angry people are just going to have to die off. What will truly end Trumpism is the icy hand of death. In 2020, more than half the Americans over the age of 65 voted for him. More than half, age 65 and older, voted for him. That's the good news. Because those are the people that are going to be dying off, are dying off. And those are the idiots who didn't get vaccinated, too, and died off at a higher rate. And so even though right now older voters dominate the electorate, the passage of time can't be stopped by an insurrection, can't be stopped by force. Trump will someday be gone. His following will fade and diminish. Political movements end. He ends by saying, we may not be prepared for whatever takes Trumpism's place, but at least we will no longer be shocked. I don't know. As I share this with you, I'm not having the same reaction I had the first time I read it. It's depressing. I wrote, Mark Twain quote, it's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. Ain't that the truth? There it is. You know, I often decry the rich. I was reading, my head's all over the place here. I was reading Ronan Farrow's piece on Elon Musk. He did a extensive piece on Elon Musk in the New Yorker, and I read it yesterday. And first of all, it some of what I thought about Musk, it turns out to, I guess, not be true. I think Ronan Farrow is a very good journalist, so I'm going with him. And the people who say that, like, Musk had all this money, his father was an emerald, none of that seems to bear out. His father was an abusive SOB who I think really mucked him up even more than he would have been, 'tis true. But one of the things in reading this, and it's a cautionary tale about how dangerous it is for a government such as ours to allow this one man on the spectrum to control so much. And he talks about how, the big guys at the Pentagon and even in the State Department are deferential to him because they need him. He controls so much that's important. The war in Ukraine. It is just terrifying. The government, I was just saying, is now reliant on him in many instances. And Farrow talked to current and former officials from NASA, the Defense Department, Transportation Department, the FAA, OSHA, and to a person, they told him that Musk's influence had become inescapable in their work. And he is treated like a sort of unelected official. He knows it. He was asked in an interview a few years ago, do you think you have more influence than the American government? And he said, in some ways. And the power he wields continues to grow. But it was interesting about his emotional self, which is damaged. He's a damaged guy and was a damaged kid, always had trouble with social interaction. And he is a crazed kind of never sleeps, workaholic, has very controlling nature, has to be the center of attention. Oh God, he's narcissistic, fucked up, man. Anyway, a few lines from him. I mean, and there are people in the government that are truly alarmed by the reliance, for instance, of NASA on Musk and SpaceX. He tries to parse what made Musk sound more and more like a Trumper, and it doesn't really come up with it. And the fact is Musk has donated to Hillary Clinton. He voted for her. He voted for Joe Biden, he has said. But then something happened. And he, in fact, has tweeted, "Give an unprovoked attacks by leading Democrats against me and a very cold shoulder to Tesla and Super X. I intend to vote Republican." He's gotten on the social, what he's done to Twitter. People who know him are really confused by this political reversal he's done. He has a daughter, Vivian, who's transgender, and he is very vocally anti-trans. His daughter has changed her last name, and in the legal filing, she said, "I no longer live with or wish to be related to my biological father in any way, shape, or form. It's a scary article. They say he's like off and off his meds. He medicates. And he's been taking this ketamine. What is this thing that everybody's doing? Ketamine? I don't know how to pronounce it. And he uses Ambien a lot because he can't sleep. And it says here that associates say that his use has escalated in recent years. And because he is isolated and he's increasingly sees himself as embattled, this is just creating more and more of his tendency to make these impulsive decisions and statements. It's what got him with Twitter. It's how he ended up with Twitter. Just total impulse. But there was this quote that really freaked me out. This is from Musk. He says he spends most of his time now in a modest house in the wetlands of South Texas near a SpaceX facility. And Musk said this, "I feel quite lonely." It's like almost like a, what I find frightening, it's like a Howard Hughes, like, sort of genius at making money and flamboyant and then increasingly isolated and going mad. But this is a guy who controls whether or not Ukrainian soldiers can communicate with each other. This is a guy who calls up Vladimir Putin, who went to China recently and was treated as essentially a head of state. This is scary. Anyway, I thought, I don't think of somebody like him, somebody that rich, that powerful, as human. So to see that quote from him, I feel quite lonely, which is an extremely vulnerable thing to say. And I was reminded of this piece that I'd read about insecurity and how it defines the psyche of America, of our culture, of our country. And that the rich don't escape it. So in this article, it's pointed out what we already know. Just in the last 3 years, the richest 1% of people in the world have gobbled up almost 2/3 of all new wealth created. 1% gets 2/3 of the pie. I don't know anybody who would argue, first of all, that that's right, that that's somehow sense, or that it's just, or even that it's sustainable. But it is true. It's estimated that 10 men possess 6 times more wealth than the poorest 3 billion people on Earth. And these appalling statistics play out, obviously, in our country as well. And the person writing this article, Astra Taylor, says, if inequality can be captured in those statistics, 1% has 2/3 of the pie. It's harder to talk about insecurity because insecurity requires talking about feelings. And that's what the whole time reading that article about Musk, where I was feeling such fear, to see him say, I am so lonely, was the only time I was touched. And this, Astra Taylor says, listen, economic issues are emotional issues. They're inextricably bound up. In America, our sense of security, for the most part, is about making money. It's about buying property, earning degrees, saving for retirement. All of that is kind of existential insecurity that haunts us. And here's the thing that we forget. Even the rich are plagued by it. It's why they keep wanting more and more. The insecurity that fed them wanting to be powerful and rich in the first place doesn't go away once they attain it. And the fact is, the way you think of like how we're in this consumer society, what drives the market often is obviously insecurity. You can see it in the ads, on the commercials, on your television. They work off of our insecurities. Do you smell right? Are your teeth white? Advertising executives, God knows that our economy capitalizes literally and figuratively on this perpetuation of insecurity. So here is one thing that is said that is so true, because I've often wondered, how are these people, like the guys who, like the Republicans who say, global warming isn't really happening. We need fossil fuels. We need to, I think, what are they thinking? Do they not have children and grandchildren? Do they not think beyond their own lives? Do they not care? And this person says, the fact is, the rich have rigged a game that can't be won, even by an Elon Musk. At the top, the ones who seem to have won. It keeps them stressed and scrambling and breathing. And they're breathing the same polluted air as the rest of us, which means that they have much to gain from rewriting the rules of this insane game, preying on our insecurity. But they're incapable of it. Rising inequality and then the rising insecurity it correlates with higher rates of physical illness, depression, anxiety, drug abuse, addiction. Living in a highly competitive consumer society makes everyone more stressed out, status conscious, and sick. And for the rich, here's what their wealth itself becomes not something that makes them secure. It just becomes a source of more worry. You got to guard your assets. You got to grow them. Bid. Fortune could be lost or finished. So when insecurity reaches a certain point, and this is where the rich ain't so happy, got news for you. When insecurity reaches a certain point, the fear of losing prevents us from enjoying what we possess already. And there it is. Fear of losing it prevents them from enjoying it. They rigged the game, and everybody loses. Anyway, just trying to come to terms with Elon Musk. How unhappy he is. And how unstable he is. And how powerful he is. Boy. On the gay news front, good news. Dear God in heaven. The Human Rights Campaign has calculated that 520 pieces of legislation to limit or remove the rights of LGBTQ people have been introduced this year in state legislatures. 520 bills to pull back, letting gay people think they're, okay. Have a seat at the table. 70 of them have been enacted. The Nigerian police, in this, raided a party. They said it was a same-sex wedding. And then they publicized the list of the names of the people at the party, over 60 people, and encouraged members of the public to help, quote, uphold the moral standards of our society. What does that mean? Here are the people, go kill them? Anyone entertaining or entering a same-sex marriage in Nigeria can be jailed for 14 years. Those who are at such a ceremony can face up to 10 years. And that's liberal compared to Uganda, where the death penalty is possible for anyone who actually engages in gay sex. And in fact, I think I read yesterday that some guy or two guys have been charged in Uganda with the crime of aggravated homosexuality. And that is punishable by death. And just want to add one thing. I have a caller. I'm coming to you. Hang on. You know how state departments put out warnings to their people about travel? Don't travel there. It's a little unsafe. The Canadian government is warning LGBTQ travelers to the United States to be careful where they go, that they may be affected by a series of state laws that restrict their civil liberties. And the quote is from their website, the Canadian government's website. Some American states have enacted laws and policies that may affect LGBTQ persons check relevant state and local laws. Actually, they have something even longer than LGBTQ. Before the LGBTQ, they have 2S LGBTQ. That's what the Canadians do. And it's explained that 2S means two-spirit. And that's the indigenous people of Canada always understood that some people, they didn't buy into this binary thing, and they always knew there were people they called two-spirit people with feminine and masculine tendencies. And so in Canada, they say 2S, two-spirit LGBTQ. As if that needs to get any longer. I'm just saying. Caller, you still there? Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Lynn. It's Ed Wren, friend and neighbor.
Hi,
I just want to comment on something that is very hopeful opportunity for the environmental movement. We've talked a little bit about it before, but the hazard is that the type of land care and landscaping we do now is extremely harmful to the environment. There's an estimate out there that up to 5% of total air pollution comes from gasoline-powered lawn and garden equipment, and this is extrapolated from an EPA study. We poison with pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and put on too much fossil fuel-based fertilizer, et cetera. But the good news is that whereas the government can, help make a transition like this, the main driver is going to be that people are going to realize that more natural, mostly native plant gardens are much more beautiful and interesting and fascinating than most of what we do now, which is monotonous, poison, monoculture grass lawns. And,
are you saying you don't like a beautiful green lawn with not a weed in sight?
I'm saying that because green is beautiful, but when I associate it with all the harms, and I'm not trying to tell people that they should get rid of lawns in which their children gamble and sports are played enthusiastically, but if you walk around, you'll realize that most lawns are not functional in that way. In fact, a lot of them are slopes. And another problem with them is that water runs right off of them into our combined sewer systems and causes erosion and flooding, whereas native plants have deep roots which soak up the water. So there's just multiple benefits, but this is low-hanging fruit because it's better for people as individuals and also as communities. Another thing that almost everybody is aware of is that gasoline-powered lawnmowers and leaf blowers are extremely noisy, and people feel very uncomfortable with saying to your neighbor, "Well, I wish you hadn't woken me up at 7 a.m. by your people leaf blowing, or you leaf blowing."
I know.
Or I wish my quiet afternoon on my front porch weren't disturbed by all the noise you're making. But it's clearly a thing, and there's an organization called Quiet Community is really great in terms of publicizing this and trying to move beyond this sort of thing without threatening people's individual rights. And I don't know, I didn't mention that the organization I'm with is called Wild Ones Native Plants Natural Landscapes, wildones.org. And we have a chapter in Western Pennsylvania. We would love to communicate with people. We're about trying to educate people, but also really helping them in very practical ways, like showing examples of different types of mostly native plant-based landscaping, which includes very neat. For example, boxwoods are dying everywhere of boxwood blight, but there's a wonderful native plant called inkberry holly, which can have the same design benefits as boxwoods, but also not die and also provide positive ecosystem benefits. So I just wanted to get that out there. And before talking any more about it, I urge you to go to wildones.org, and you can find information about our chapter.
Okay, so
anyway,
again,
Lynn,
Wild
great
Ones.
show.
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
wildones.org.
.org. Okay, I hope people. Thank you for that. I really hope. I mean, I so hate those blowers and the noise. It drives me insane, and I now look at those big lawns as just folly, as insanity.
Right.
But okay, little by little, people will come around. Mother Nature.
Yeah, we don't want to shame people, because people may not realize this. They may really not think of what they could do instead, because it does require creativity and knowledge, but it's well worth it just on an individual and community level, and of course globally. So anyway, thanks so much for the show. I should listen more often. It's always informative and thought-provoking, although sometimes a little overwhelming and depressing. But
that's for sure.
So we can all come together and make a difference. So thanks so much, Lynn. See you around.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, bye.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye. That's a guy who lives in my neighborhood who I bump into while we're walking our dogs, and I know his lawn doesn't exist anymore. It's just wild flowers, which, I look at it, the first time I saw, I laughed because, he lives next door to some person with a, very manicured lawn. And I'm thinking, I wonder if the neighbors, it's just, I think I told you, I have no grass anymore in my small plot. I took out the last grass a year ago and just have plants. I'm not doing everything that he's saying, because I'm sure I have some non-native plants, but whatever I got, it sure is better than the absurdity of grass. Just saying. Did you read that thing about the tiny forest? That this is something that started in Japan, and that on a piece of, take the size of a tennis court, okay? On that much land, all over the world, people are planting native shrubs and saplings and just sticking them in their cheek to jowl, so you can't believe how many there are. But before they do it, they totally enrich the soil and then put these things in, and bam, like within a few years, you got something that looks like a little forest. And these little forests are doing just wondrous things, absorbing storm water. So they naturally suppress weeds. They provide habitats for all kinds of wildlife, and that with all our expanses of asphalt and stuff, that these are the kinds of things that can help, and that help clean the air and help give shade and and in cities, they're especially wondrous. These little forests can grow as quickly as 10 times the speed of a conventional tree plantation. And that means they support more birds and animals and insects and hang on to more carbon. And they're after the initial year or two, they just take care of themselves. They retain heat from the sun. The guy who came up with this is a Japanese guy who, I don't think he's alive anymore, but he won what is considered the Nobel Prize of environmentalism, called the Blue Planet Prize, for creating these fast-growing native forests. There was a really interesting piece about them in the New York Times. Yeah. Speaking of natural and all that, I haven't mentioned anything about the Pittsburgh City Council finally turning its attention to the deer population, overpopulation. It's a subject, as you know, I've ranted about for a few years because it's destroying our glorious parks. The deer are destroying the parks because there's 5, 6, 7 times more of them than the parks can sustain, and not be, they're eating all the saplings. So what you're left with is old trees and nothing coming up new. And so this idea of culling the herd is a way to preserve the glories of Pittsburgh's huge, wondrous parks. I've told you how people who know such things have voiced true alarm that we're nearing a point at which the parks will cease to exist as they were in their natural state. The deer have got to be culled. And not just that, my God, I live near Frick Park, and do you know how disquieting it is to see deer? I mean, I've seen big bucks walking down Fifth Avenue. Yeah. The other day, I was driving behind a car, and all of a sudden he slams on his brakes. I slammed on mine. I could have rear-ended the guy. And I thought, what the hell? What the hell? And then I saw slammed on his brakes to keep from hitting a young deer who was running across Beechwood Boulevard. They're everywhere. And they're getting killed, and they're killing the forests, and the whole thing is a mess and has got to be taken care of. And I'm glad that at least, finally, the people who are in a position to do something are acknowledging the problem. As usual, a bit late, but better. Speaking of our forests, I just want to get this in. I saw that the state legislature is, they're not letting me get it. They're talking about a bill which will put suicide awareness signage in the state's forests. When I first saw that, I thought, what? You mean if I'm like trying to get away from the stress of urban life and I head off to some beautiful forested state parks and trying to get lost in nature, and I'm going to come on a sign saying, hey, don't kill yourself. I know that's probably what it wouldn't say, but it would be something like, if you're thinking of self-harm, call this number. And the reason that is sort of like an intrusion into why you go into the forest in the first place, to get away from all of that stress. But on the other hand, forests, I guess, are where a lot of people do go to kill themselves. And I forget how many people have killed themselves in state forests, but there's quite a number. And I guess the hope is that somebody going in will think twice if they bump into one of those signs. It strikes me as a little, I don't know. I don't know. Well, the good news is I'm starting to see lots of headlines that says that, these SOBs, the Trumpers, Giuliani, there's consequences starting to happen left, right, center, everywhere. I even forgot about this one. The New York Attorney General, she just asked a judge saying, hey, there's no reason to even have a trial about this because it's based on the undisputed evidence. You can simply say Donald Trump and his kids presented grossly and materially inflated asset values, fraudulently overvaluing their assets by billions of dollars, and we don't even have to have a trial. Now, odds are the judge will say, yeah, well, we're going to have a trial. That trial is scheduled for October. Now, he can't go to jail, but that trial, if he loses, comes with a fine of $250 million, $250 million. And then you got Rudy now, the judge saying, is liable for what he did to those two poor women, the mother and daughter, who we saw testify in front of the January 6th committee. Oh, my God. He defamed them. Well, the trial will go forward. The judge says, and he will bear their legal bills. The thing is, he's got his apartment in New York up for sale. He can't pay his own bills. Giuliani is going hat in hand to Bedminster and Mar-a-Lago and saying, hey, Don, look what I did for you. I destroyed myself for you. Would you please help me here? And of course, he should know better than to appeal to Donald Trump. Trump never pays his lawyers, especially if they lose. So Giuliani, I don't know how much these two women are going to get out of him, even if they win this case, which they will, hands down, because I don't think he's got any money. Donald Trump destroys everything, everybody who comes into his orbit, destroys them. Think of the families he's destroyed by family members falling prey to the cult. We know the destruction he's done to our government and our trust in its institutions. And like Elon Musk, these crippled men end up alone. Hey, Mitch McConnell, my God. If we have publicly seen two strokes that he's had just right in front of the cameras in the last month, you got to believe this is happening to him a lot more. He looks so frail. He looks like a stiff wind could blow him over. He makes Dianne Feinstein look hale and hearty. And I do want to say this. The people who then say there need to be age limits. I don't think age is the thing. I think health is the thing. So there are plenty of extremely unhealthy 40-year-olds. Nobody says they shouldn't be able to run. And there are very healthy 80-plus-year-olds whose heads are still working great and stuff like that. So this always throwing the baby out with the bathwater approach that, it just doesn't, hold. But I think as young people become more and more engaged in our political system, we will see this gerontocracy finally give way. But don't throw all the old farts out. I was just reading something about the Pope. I love this guy. His head works. Body ain't doing so hot. His head works. I think that's it. And just about the Pope. You saw he went after American Catholics and their hierarchy. He said that the American Catholic hierarchy has a very strong, organized, reactionary attitude. And he actually said backwardness of American Catholics, not all, but the right wingers is who he's talking about. And he said ideology has replaced their faith. And they become culture warriors rather than pastors. And the view of the religion that they're offering is warped by politics. Yeah. And how the American Catholic Church is pretty much out of step with a whole bunch of other national churches in their right-wing conservatism. And it feeds into the MAGA movement. All right, I guess that's it. I'm done. I'm so done. Oh, Monday. Is that Labor Day? I won't be here. If Monday's Labor Day, I'm not going to be here. I'm telling you that right now. It's going to be a no-show. Sort of like that super harvest blue moon. Damn. Okay? See you Tuesday.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.